former Home Secretary Suella Braverman says that she is ashamed by the levels of anti-Semitism in Britain, and the UK should not row back on its support for Israel. Yeah, and with the swastika row over the weekend, I'm sure you've seen that video with the policeman. Have we lost control of our streets? Do the Jewish community feel safe? We're joined now by Chairman of National Jewish Assembly, Gary Mond. Good morning, Gary. Do the Jewish people feel safe in this country then? Let's get straight to it.
I think many of them don't, quite frankly. I think the levels of anti-Semitism have risen catastrophically since the 7th of October. We've seen examples in hospitals, in schools, in universities, in businesses of Jews being discriminated against. And worst of all, these marches that take place regularly every Saturday, which Suella Braverman would have banned if she'd had the opportunity to do, are helping to ferment Jew hatred across the country.
We had this incident over the weekend, Gary, on these protests that we're seeing every single weekend, pro-Palestinian. And there was a conversation between a protester, a pro-Israel protester, we assume, and one of the police officers. We're just going to have a quick look at it to remind ourselves what happened.
You'd like to walk with me because I can point these people out to you. And again, I was told when I asked that a swastika was not necessarily anti-Semitic or disruptive to public order. That doesn't seem right to me.
Everything needs to be taken within context, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's a context of hate. Why does this swastika need context?
So this was the moment this Jewish lady complained about seeing placards of a swastika. She complained to a policeman who stood there swirling his coffee, swigging his coffee, and said everything needs to be taken in context. What did he mean by that, do you think?
I'm not sure he actually knew what he meant by it, but I think the context was a hate march. The context was hatred of Jews, hatred of Israel. And if anyone thinks that the context could be different, then they're not watching properly. This is not the context of a Hindu wedding, because in the Hindu religion, the swastika can be used in a favourable manner, but not in this case whatsoever. What needs to be done is we should follow Germany in outlawing the use of the swastika completely and making it a criminal offence to do so in these circumstances.
You see, I was quite reassured by hearing that police officer say that, Gary, because too often we leap to a conclusion, and a symbol, as you say, can have different meanings in even that symbol in different contexts. But was it therefore just that police officer didn't quite understand the context of the march, do you think?
I think that's quite possible. The context of the march was blindingly obvious, though, to most of us. There is, of course, I don't want to sort of pick on an individual police officer, but there is the issue of training and making sure that all police officers are fit for purpose in terms of doing their jobs. And this means education on certain basic issues, like what a swastika is, like the Holocaust, and like other instances of anti-Semitism. I'm wondering how well trained that particular police officer was, and indeed so many of his colleagues.
I think you're being very generous there, saying he needs retraining. We've seen week upon week since October these marches, people singing from the river to the sea, carrying placards saying Houthi rebels, turn those ships around. You know, you're being very, very generous there. And in actual fact, whether you agree with people like Tommy Robinson or not, he was pounced upon by scores and scores of officers for having breakfast in a cafe. Make of that what you will, but it seems to be, as Suella Braverman is saying, there's one rule for one and one rule for another. And she said in her piece today that she'd actually have banned those marches if she wasn't sacked initially.
I'm not being generous. We see these marches are blatant cases of Jew hatred. I am being generous to an individual officer because I don't think it's right to pick on an individual officer.
Yeah.
But I would say categorically there is no doubt.
We're running out of time, unfortunately, but very much appreciate you being with us. Scotland Yard have said the clip is a short excerpt from a 10-minute conversation. During the full conversation, the officer establishes that the person was concerned about, had already been arrested for a public order offence in relation to that placard.